Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Perspective Shift podcast. Today's episode is going to be all about emotions. You know, they are a core part of our human experience. And we want to talk about how objective these emotions may seem and how in reality each of us feel them in very different ways, in very nuanced ways. We also want to talk about how emotions might stand in our way sometimes and also help us in our decision making. And of course, we're going to be talking about our own subjective experiences with emotions, how we both feel them differently, and also the whole stereotypes in society and how women must feel their emotions and how men are supposed to hide them. So it's going to be a big topic. And I want to start with the whole idea that our emotions are objective. You know, this is a traditional view in the world that we've always heard that, you know, anger is an emotion that you feel and I feel and everyone feels in the same way. You can say that about any other emotion like happiness or sadness, that what makes me happy is going to make you happy. And what we discover with time, and this is actually the work of Lisa Barrett in her book, How Emotions Are Made, she covered this topic in a big way on how our emotions are constructed. And they are constructed because of different reasons: our experience, our brain wiring, our influence, how we grew up. And when you apply that knowledge in the way humans behave and how we interact with each other, it becomes very apparent and obvious that this is actually true. And what sadness for me isn't necessarily how it is for you. What makes me sad might not make you sad. It might make you feel different things, you know. So what do you think about that?
I feel like a lot of people forget, or we just usually tend to forget that it's a spectrum. We've talked about this before, that everything is a spectrum. And just like everything else in this world, it's just like an open-ended spectrum. Or like, for example, we both could be angry or sad about the exact same event. It's just that my relation to the event, which triggered my emotion of sadness, was a little bit more on the higher end of it than yours, where it was, for example, like a little bit more in the middle. And beside that, you can also, back to one of your points that you mentioned, that the way we perceive emotions and the way we show our emotions and deal with them is related a lot to our genes, to our upbringings, to our brain wiring, to our own experience, and to our past. Just like if you want to take a trauma as an example in this, trauma is the emotional connection that you've got with an event that happened in the past.
Sure.
And because of that, your brain wires something in the sense of like, whenever a similar event happens in the future, I'm going to be having the same reaction that I had in the past. And then you can apply this not only, I just took trauma as an example here because a lot of people, well, I would guess that a good amount of people would be able to relate to this.
We're all traumatized in a certain way.
Exactly. And then you can take this to everything else. Like you can see the patterns in yourself and how we react, perceive, and even interact in the same emotions that we've done in the past due to our own experience with these certain topics or certain events or the certain stuff that we've heard or stuff that's been said to us or stuff that's been done to us or stuff that we did ourselves. It's a huge range, but this and the fact that it's a spectrum make us define these emotions differently in a subjective manner. Or like sadness for me could be this, and sadness for you could be a little slightly bit different. Mm-hmm. And then that changes the way that we understand, we shape, and we interact with emotions.
I feel like this is another evidence how that it's a spectrum, and the fact that our emotions are actually really connected to our thoughts. You know, the stories we tell ourselves. We already covered that part, and how, you know, you might get sensations in your body when you get a feeling, but the emotion, this intense emotion, is more about what you're telling yourself, how you are reacting in that sense. So I feel like there are separate things, the feelings that you get, like it's physical sensations, and the emotions that you are feeling, this deep frustration and happiness and sadness. This is all like, this is what makes it, I think, more subjective. Is just because we have different experiences and different stories, and it's all unique to our lives, and everyone else has experienced different things. So they might understand what you mean by anger, but how they feel it is a bit different. It's the same with colors, for example. I think it's a good comparison because we all know what colors are, what blue and what red, but it is proven now that we all see them in different shades, and how women sometimes have more shades of color. They see more colors than men. So I think it's kind of a interesting comparison in that sense.
And if you look at it like this, just like to build up upon what you said, the physical reaction that you have to a certain emotion is also related to your past. Because the body, we go back to that, the body is the subconscious mind, and your subconscious mind interprets reality as such in the manner that you've experienced your past. So when in the past something happened and you felt a certain emotion, when something similar happens in the future, the body gonna reconnect that to the experience that you've had in the past and gives you the physical sensations. Thank you. The physical sensations that you've had in the past, because that's what it kind of got programmed into, or that's what kind of got written in it as a code per se.
I think also sometimes it can be confusing. Like, I think the best example for that for me is like when I get this intense stomach pain, it's like there is a needle that being stuck in my stomach, and it makes me feel anxious and excited at the same time. It's always this, it's the same sensation, but it means different things in different times, you know?
That's your perception.
Yeah.
So I've heard this before, that professional athletes interpret emotions, or the body or the physical reaction to emotions differently than the average human being.
I think that would make sense.
They interpret anxiety or fear as excitement, because it's kind of just like the same physical sensations that you've got, the same chemicals that are going in your brain. It's just that you choose whether you want to take it as something
how do you want to interpret
anxiety provoking,
which emotion do you want to construct.
Exactly. And then that determines, so that's based on your past, and that determines on how you're looking at yourself and at your future.
I see it,
which is like, again, related to the story that we talked about.
I see it like when you have a new job interview, or if you're meeting a new person, or you find something that you want to talk to, you know, it's also like anxiety and excitement at the same time. It's like, yeah, which one do you focus on more, and which emotions are you constructing in the moment? Of course, all of this happens more subconsciously than consciously, but I think by understanding that how emotions are subjective and such, you might be more able to have your emotions under control, and also to have more empathy towards other people. If they are telling you a story, it's making them really sad, but maybe you don't interpret it as that sad, but you still try to have empathy that for them, this is what they are feeling, this is what their experience is, you know? So I think it's a very, very interesting thing how the traditional view is slowly fading away, and people are realizing more and more how emotions are really nuanced and really deep, and not as superficial or stereotypical as we might think.
I feel like there's also a little bit of lacking of understanding of emotions in today's society. On the one hand, we know what emotions are. We know how emotions objectively are, to be more precise. But when it comes to our own experience, sometimes people don't know what they're feeling. So, for example, you know that sadness is this and this, but when they're feeling sad themselves, they kind of are not sure if they're feeling sad or anger.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
And then I feel like that's mostly related due to the lack of vocabularies that we've got.
Oh yeah.
So we don't have enough terms. We don't have not only we don't have enough terms, but we also are not really, we don't know all the terms that are related to how we feel. And it's, again, the language barrier. In some languages, you can find better terms to describe some stuff.
That's what I wanted to talk about.
And the more you can describe something, or the more that you've got something that can describe what you're feeling, the better that you can feel it, understand it.
Yeah.
And then on the other end is, I guess, that a little bit more logical definition of emotions, which is like anxiety is when you're fearful about the future.
Explanation.
Depression is when you're fearful, or when you're stuck in the past. You've got, for example, like sadness is when you have got a lack of options that you don't know how to deal with. And then when you start understanding what emotions in the logical sense are and how we can deal with them, and when you've got your terms and the vocabulary to describe them better. Like that's when you start developing a better understanding your own emotions and the emotions of others as well. Because then you can tell what they're feeling on a deeper level while still being able to help them maybe understand or explain it in a certain way so that they can know that you're actually listening to.
I think this works to a certain degree, but I still think emotions are much more abstract than we think they are. No matter what words we have or how much we understand them, sometimes they still get the best of us or stand in our way. And I think when you mentioned the word thing, it's just really true, because if you look at certain languages, they have specific words to certain emotions that you don't see in other languages. Like in German, that's like the word on top of my head is Fremdschämen. It's like second-hand embarrassment. There is no word for it in English. It's not used as often, but in German, it is a very known emotion, and people feel it more because they know the word associated with it. So they know how to construct this emotion. So I think it's a process that goes back and forth. Like, you know more words about emotions, and then automatically you feel more range of emotions. It's very, very interesting.
It's because you can describe them to yourself.
It's very interesting because the stories. Yeah.
It's not only this, but it's also like related to the brain is being able to deconstruct the emotion and actually understand it.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's like if I'm showing you a game, a toy, for example, and then you know how to play. You don't know how to play it, and then I explain to you how to play level 1, and then you play level 1, and then when I explain to you that there's different ways of playing the game, that's when you start experimenting with the game yourself a bit more and start finding other ways to play it, other ways to have fun while doing it. And then your range of how you want to interact with the game or with the toy changes. And it's the same with emotions, because the brain is able to deconstruct the emotions in a certain way so that the brain can understand the emotion and interpret it on either a deeper level or maybe in a more specific way so that even you understand, okay, this is what I'm feeling, and I can only describe it because I know what that.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense to me. And this brings me to the next point, which is like, since we don't understand our emotions as much as we think, and most people struggle with their emotions, automatically these emotions might stand in your way when you try to make decisions, especially when you live in the modern age that we are in, where logical thinking is more and more important. And like, people want to be productive, people want to seek money, people want to get the best jobs. And all of this requires that you have your emotions under control, and that you use your head more often than not. So it is always a struggle. How do you find the balance between being emotional when needed and being logical? This is something that I struggle with myself a lot in my personal life, that I feel my emotions very deeply, but at the same time, it's not something that I show other people. And, we talked about this before, about the higher ego that makes you want to be productive and stuff. I know when I am in that stage, it is hard for me to connect with my emotions as much as I want to, because if I do, sometimes they might make me take certain decisions that are based on my emotional state instead of using my head to analyze things and go with a decision. So I mentioned that because, as I said, it's a big struggle for me. And, we've talked about this before, but I'd like also to know how you think about this issue, if it is an issue, and how do you balance your emotions?
That kind of reminds me of something that Mark Manson said. And he said that be careful what you teach yourself in your mid-20s, because that's what you're going to be working on toward the end of the 20s to remove out of your life.
Yeah.
I guess a lot of people get stuck in that loop of either too emotional or too logical, which is like literally just the complete different end of the spectrums. And they grow older with this without thinking about it, I guess, a lot. And then they reach the point where like they need to find a balance between them. It's really not that easy. Even I don't have the balance myself that much. It's something that I guess as a human species who tend to be more impulsive, and we're social animals. Like if you're going to go to the core of it, we're social animals, we're animals. And because of that, we are more impulsive.
Because of that, we are more emotional.
Exactly. And we're impulsive. And then you look at the modern age and modern society, you've got everything around you literally set up to provoke this impulsivity that you've got inside of you. Whether it's being impulsive to eat, whether it's impulsive to do whatever you want.
See, that's where I think it's a dilemma because modern society tries to provoke these compulsions in you, the emotional side, but also they tell you if you want to be successful, you should use your head more, you should put your emotions on the side, be more productive. It's a dilemma in the modern society that makes people unsure what to do.
I guess that's one of the main issues that I've struggled with that myself a lot in the past, which is everyone tells you what you should do, but no one tells you how you should do it.
Yeah.
And no one mentions the fact that society and the norms in our society nowadays is literally quite the opposite of what everyone has been talking about. It's like everyone goes like, okay, you should work, you should be more successful, you should make more money, you should be more self-aware and this, but no one tells you how. And it's not like, the problem is that even when people tell you how, and that's the paradox, that's the part where it contradicts itself. Even when people tell you how to do it, you wouldn't listen to them.
Yeah, sure.
And that's a contradiction that we've got nowadays. It's about finding, that's at least what works for me. I try to use my logical brain in the sense of I'm going to deconstruct what's going on, whether it's a decision that I've got to make or some change that I want to implement in my life. And I'm going to try to understand it in a logical way of like, what has, so let's take a step back so I can give a better explanation. I look at my life as I'm a bit more of a math nerd. Yes, people don't know this, I guess. But I look at life as an equation. You've got this, plus this, minus this, minus that, multiplied by this, whatever, and then you've got the end result, which is technically the book that I've talked about in the last episode about your life. And when you want to add something to that equation, it goes on the other end of the equation, and then you've got to subtract something from the first end of the equation, so there's a balance.
Sure, yeah. It's
just like if you want to add something new to your life, something either has to go or has to be reduced to a certain degree,
sure,
so you can implement that in your life. So for me, that's the logical side of what I do, which is like I try to compare things. Like, okay, if I want to do this in my life, what do I have to reduce or stop doing? What do I have to let go of so I can have enough space in my life for this? And you've got to realize that this is more than just the equation, because say you want to stop eating unhealthy, you still want to stop eating outside. That's going to mean that you can't go out with your friends to eat outside with them anymore, unless you're fine with sitting with them on the table where you're the only one who's drinking only and they're eating. So there's a lot of changes that can happen in between. And then I look at the emotional side of it, which I determine for me, as Ali Abdal said when he was talking about the different types of burnout, and he talked about the misalignment or the alignment burnout. And my emotional side of it is this something that I genuinely want? And is it something that's going to give me the emotions that I want? And is it something that's going to lead me in an emotional path that I'm seeking or not? And do I feel any sort of misalignment between the thing that I'm trying to implement and the way that I'm feeling innerly? It's not always that easy to do, but I've heard this. I genuinely don't remember who said it. It's a concept. The concept is when something happens, when someone says something to you, or when you've got a decision to make, you have like this empty space where you can go into it to consider how you're going to get out of it. So to be more precise, because
how are you going to react?
Exactly. To be more precise, the way that I described it for myself is you've got this hallway, and this is the entrance. The entrance is either the thought that you've got or what people told you or a decision that you want to make, whatever it is. And then you enter the hallway. And then to exit the hallway, which you have to do, you've got an undefined amount of doors. Every door got its own description. Right, so we got into this hallway, this empty space, and then to get out of it, there's the door that says, okay, I'm going to get out of it angrily. I'm going to get out of it anxious. I'm going to get out of it feeling like this. And then this space once something happens and you try to take this couple of seconds, step back and try to detach yourself from it and think about it a little bit to help you determine which door you want to take to get out of the space. I feel like that's really helpful. I'm really not sure how to do it. I can't tell this to anyone because I'm still trying to implement that in my life.
It's something I like. I understand completely how you describe it and how it, in the best case scenario, it would work. But I think realistically, most of us won't be able to imagine that or make the decision in that sense when we are in a highly intense emotional state, because that's where you're like, sometimes it's hard to make the decision in that instant. But I think you can train yourself with trial and error how to keep distance between you and the decision that you are making when you are getting aroused with the emotion, with that feeling that you're getting in your body, for example. And then you make the decision, how am I going to react here? Am I going to get angry and shout at this person, or I'm going to remain calm and continue listening to him, for example? Mm-hmm. This is something that you can't do just instantly. This is something that you have to train yourself. Maybe you meditate more and you try to understand your emotions more. But I think even the best people at controlling their emotions, they still have instances where this doesn't work. You know what I mean?
But I feel like that's part of the human experience.
Yeah.
Like, this is
nothing wrong with that.
I'm pretty sure that this is going to piss a lot of people off. All right. Because I've said this before to many people and they don't take it too well, I guess. It's just the fact that we're not perfect.
Of course not.
It's part of that. Some stuff are going to happen, and to put it quite bluntly, you're going to fuck up. And you're going to fuck up again and again.
It's about getting closer and closer to the version that you want, but
exactly,
you might never reach that ultimatum. Like,
exactly,
perfect vision, and it doesn't exist.
Who said this? It's like in the pursuit of perfection, you get better, but you've got to realize at some point that you'll never be perfect.
Yeah. That's a point, though. You want to get better.
Stuff are going to happen and you're going to react in ways that you don't want to. And I feel like once people start understanding that we're not perfect and that literally everyone is bound to fuck up at some point, they start focusing more on
just getting better.
What happens afterwards. So I'm going to derail a little bit off topic here. But say something happened and I did something, or I said something mean to somebody, or I was rude, or I was like a bit too harsh or something. Maybe in the heat of the moment, I wasn't really able to think it through quite well, and you got overwhelmed with the emotions that they were sharing with you, or overwhelmed with the situation, or something happened and you just said what you said. Once you start realizing that people are going to fuck up, I feel like you can start focusing on what comes afterwards. So the fuck ups are bound to happen. But I guess what matters most is how you deal with the
how do you handle that?
Exactly. You handle it in the sense of like, okay, I fucked up. I'm going to try to work on that and improve myself. And I'm going to give the person that I fucked up with a genuine apology and make sure that in the future, this never happens again.
Try to fix some mistakes.
Exactly. Or am I just going to fuck up? And then I'm going to beat myself around it for 2 years before I decide to change anything about it. And in that process, I'm going to be hurting everyone around.
You know, I see it as I don't know if it's a good example actually, but let's say you're trying to quit a bad habit, and then you don't do that habit for a while, and then you start doing it again, whether it's smoking, whether it's watching porn again, whatever it is. And then after you're done with that, how do you react to this relapse?
Exactly.
Are you going to beat yourself up and maybe do it again and again, more and more, because you already feel like shit, so why not? Or do you have empathy towards yourself and you apologize to yourself and tell yourself that you're going to do better, and it's only a misstep, it's only a setback, and you're going to push forward? And it's the same with how we maybe overreact with our emotions and stuff. And I think it's just about finding more balance as much as we can. For me, it was like, when I was younger, it was at the extreme end of being too compulsive and too emotional and never thinking about the future, never using my head, just reacting to any emotion that arises and intensifying it, making it worse, getting more angry, getting more sad, more depressed. And then the last few years, it went to the other end of the spectrum, where like I am using my head more. I'm trying to forget my emotion, to curb them, to pretend they don't exist sometime and just be on this productive train on doing more, doing more, doing more. So I think the solution is just to find more balance between these two things, which is something difficult, but you can get better at with trying again and again and seeing how things will go, you know?
That's the paradox in there, to be honest, that emotions, just like you said, you've got to, there's like a little child that you have to keep under control. But at the same time, you kind of want to feel your emotions, whether it's joy, especially joy. If you don't feel joy, then
I think joy is more important than happiness, you know?
And so you want to keep them under control because they're a little child. But at the same time, you actually want to feel your emotions. And that's the paradox. Like, what do we do here? Do we feel them? Sorry, do we keep them under control, or do we actually feel them? Is, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And that's where the conflict comes to
It depends on
happen.
the
How do I deal with it?
it depends on the timing. Like there are times where you should feel your emotions, there are times where you should just keep them under control.
Exactly.
Like
I feel like that's something that a lot of people,
like if you get that joke, if you remember something funny, or if you think about something that is gonna give you an inappropriate emotion when you are at a funeral, you should not feel that emotion. You should try to remain. You know what I mean? Like it just depends where you are and what you're doing.
you should just not show it off.
Yeah,
You can feel it, but just don't show it off.
exactly.
I feel like it's something that people need, something that we need to be told. That sometimes it's quite alright to tell yourself that I'm not gonna feel my emotions right now. I'm just gonna put them in a box, leave them on the side. But the box is not to be forgotten, no matter what. So if you are under a huge amount of distress and you're dealing with something and stuff keeps coming up, you've got two options. Get overwhelmed and feel your emotions and then just stop moving, or put your emotions in the box, deal with what you've got to deal with, because you can't really control your emotions. And then after you're done, you can just go back and like, okay, we're going to reopen the box, and whatever comes out of the box, I'm going to have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like a lot of people don't know that they can put it in a box and put it on the side.
Sure.
And whatever happens, it just spills out on other people.
Let's make it clear also that, which also brings us to the next point actually, that, you know, women are taught since they were young that it's okay to feel your emotions, and it's very normal when you're a woman to feel your emotions and to express them openly in front of all people. So this gives them the ability to regulate their emotions in a better way than men, because they grew up feeling these emotions in the environment and nobody is judging them for that. But when you look at men, in a lot of societies, in a lot of cultures, especially the culture we came in, you grow up learning that you're a man, you should not feel emotions, they're going to stand in your way, you're supposed to be rigid, you're supposed to be harsh sometimes, and, you know, all of these different terms that tell you you have to be more like a robot, a productive robot who is doing the work, who is pushing and pushing and pushing and never showing any sign of weakness. And I think that plays a big role why men especially have more emotional outbursts, like more aggression, more anger issues, and all of these different things, because we don't learn effectively how to regulate them since we are young. This is something for a lot of us we have to learn by ourselves with time, when we see that, oh, I have emotions, maybe I should feel them. Should I feel them? People are going to look at me, oh, he's being vulnerable, this is not a good thing, you know. But that's what they say, that vulnerability is not good. But of course, vulnerability is very important, whether you're a man or a woman. So yeah.
I feel like before we dive into this, we've got to define two things. Weakness, as you mentioned, weakness, and vulnerability.
It's for me, it's just like, I'm not saying that if you're vulnerable, you are weak, but this is what a lot of people see.
But you mentioned how people see men who are showing emotions as weak.
Yeah.
As if that's weakness. So for me, like, okay, I want to define what weakness is. And then we've talked, and then you mentioned vulnerability later.
Sure.
And I want to define what vulnerability actually means. I've heard a lot of different definitions of vulnerability, and the one that resonated the most with me, and the one that made a lot of sense to me personally, at least, was something between the lines that vulnerability is you willingly putting yourself in a position where you could be harmed. Okay, then we can take, again, vulnerability and deconstruct it to a lot of things. And then I guess a lot of people have a misconception about it. So I feel like there's the emotional vulnerability, where you're emotionally being vulnerable. As an example is when you're sharing something with somebody and they can literally hurt your feelings when you're sharing this. And there's like experience vulnerability per se, where it's like you're trying to experience something new and that experience could always backfire on you and harm you, whether physically
you're exposing
or
yourself.
Exactly. So vulnerability is when you're willing to put yourself in a position where you could be harmed, not for the sake of being harmed, but just for the sake of you trying it, you're doing something.
Yeah, which actually requires strength.
Exactly.
So that brings us to weakness. For me personally, weakness is when you want to do something, you're afraid of it, and that fear holds you back, and you don't do it. That's my definition.
That's the logical, that's for me. That's the logical definition of weakness. How would you define emotional weakness? Okay. Because I like to deconstruct things a little bit more, and like, okay, what is?
I haven't thought about that in that sense. I've always, in the past, of course, I saw weakness as what people were telling me, that if I show emotions, if I'm being vulnerable, that's when I'm weak. But I don't believe that at all anymore. So, emotional.
Look at it in a different way. How would you define emotional strength?
Emotional strength is,
or being strong emotionally. Let's put it like this.
Being strong emotionally is that you're confident by the emotions that you're feeling, that you're showing in front of people, and you're just not insecure about them. You want to laugh and dance around when the people are around you, because you feel like you just do it. You don't hold yourself.
Exactly.
But this is actually what fear is. Like if you're afraid, you want to dance, you're afraid because the people are gonna judge you, then you are, in a sense, kind of weak.
True. Maybe I like to just deconstruct things a little bit too much.
Sure.
But exactly, like the opposite of what you said is literally weakness. Was for me, I look at it as like weakness, especially emotional weakness, is when you're holding yourself back from being yourself by putting on a mask because you're afraid of how people are going to react.
Exactly. This is weakness.
Exactly.
In authenticity.
Yeah. Back to the topic, of course. Feel the difference is that of course, the upbringing, the environment, and all of this plays a role. Even the genes, even the hormones in the body.
And I'm not. Let's not deny that maybe men and women do feel different, nuanced emotions. It's not to say that we are all the same. We all feel the same. We are different genders. So
I still don't really. I don't know. I don't have any proof of this. I've never really read anything about it. But for me personally, I always relate emotions with what we've talked about so far: genes, childhood, upbringing, hormones.
Yeah,
because I feel like hormones play a huge role in that. Your perception, how you interpret the story that you tell yourself, and a part in there which I guess plays a role in relation to what we're talking about is in today's society, just like you said, men are told not to show emotions, not to be vulnerable, not to do this and that. And that already shapes our brain wiring and our subconscious to a certain degree that we decide not to do it. And when we have the opportunity to do it, and if we decide to do it, the reaction that you get from people is usually not a reaction that you'd be expecting.
Yeah.
And then that goes like a confirmation bias that confirms what society told you as a child. And then you decide to look yourself up more. It's like a loop that's literally just like a never ending loop.
It just confirms your core belief.
And in return, if you want to look at it differently, since the majority of men decide not to be emotional, not to show vulnerability, when one of their male friends is being a bit emotional or showing emotions, our initial reaction as men is not to validate the emotions, give you comfort, and try to listen. Our initial reaction to that, because of our upbringing,
get weirded out, maybe.
Not necessarily, but it's also solving the problem. Like, you notice the difference between women who listen, validate, and try to give you emotional support, and men who are just like, oh, there's a problem. God, come on.
We get a little bit uncomfortable. Like, I know from my own experience, if it happened multiple times where someone cried in front of me, and like, in most cases you're supposed to be just listening and calming them down and stuff. But for me, as you said, it was like problem solving. There's a problem here. This person is crying for a reason. How do you solve this problem?
Exactly.
What advice can you give? What can you say? Like just a robot. Because I don't know how to deal with that otherwise. I haven't learned how to be more vulnerable in that moment. And I don't know. It just, it's really related to your upbringing. I think your upbringing plays the biggest part. Like that's how
we've never been taught how to deal with this. Yeah. And not only just from society and family, but even from friends.
Yeah.
Because like, say a male guy who goes into cries in front of his other male guys. The friends, the boys, the guys are not going to know how to react, and they're going to take it as a problem that they need to solve. And that just confirms the loop to make it even more complicated.
For a lot of us, we only start to realize that when the big problem happens. Like you notice you have a lot of emotional outbursts, and then somebody goes to therapy or they start reading online. Why do I feel this way? Why does this happen? And then something brings you to something. That's how it was for me. One point led me to the next until I read some books about vulnerability and how and shame and guilt and all of these different emotions and the struggle with emotions for men and all of this, which helped me realize that I should be more connected to my emotions, be more vulnerable, which is something that is still a huge struggle for me. But slow steps, progress,
baby steps,
becoming more balanced, getting closer to the version that you want.
For sure. I feel like that's a problem. I don't know if it's a problem, but that's something that we have to tackle at some point as a society, I guess.
We're getting better, I think.
Which is the fact that I feel like society is not ready yet for men to be vulnerable. Not in a demeaning way to females, but even women and everyone else in society, like we said, everyone grows up with the implementation that men are not supposed to be vulnerable. So when a man is vulnerable, I feel like even a lot of women don't know how to react to that, and they view it as if the man is weak because that's what they've been taught.
You're not going to be accepted in society.
That just going to reconfirm, we go back to the same
confirmation bias,
to the same cycle, and then men decide to lock themselves up a bit more.
Yeah,
I've heard, and I'm pretty sure that there's studies out there that would prove this, that a lot of people, especially in our generation, that are talking about, especially female, that are saying that they want males or men who've got more emotional intelligence, who are more emotional, who are more vulnerable, and this and this. But once they meet a guy who's actually in that direction, it freaks them out. Because
they're not used to it. Well,
I don't think people look at men as that we feel emotions. I think people look at us as problem-solving machines. Like when you've got a machine that's literally just solving problems, and then that machine suddenly have an outburst, and just like, what is going on with that machine? You don't know what to do.
I think the issue is this is a bigger topic. Maybe we will tackle it one day. That a lot of things that modern society believe in and they think as true is just not true. Like
things are changing in a rapid rate.
Exactly. Not only that, the misinformation, like how men should behave, how this, how that. A lot of people just don't have the right knowledge, don't bother to learn more about psychology or philosophy or anything that we talk about in this podcast or in private as well. That just so many things are misunderstood in modern society that were much better understood in older civilizations. This is, of course, a bigger topic, but I think it's related. This issue is related to that young people just don't have the right information about so many things, and they misinterpreted so many topics.
I feel like that's just my own opinion here, but I feel like that's mainly related to the concepts that we've developed as a society so far. By concepts,
like you mean capitalism and materialism and what we value.
Part of it is that, but at the same time, when I'm talking about concepts, I mean concepts of how you should behave, how you should react.
Yeah, that's for sure.
What this reaction means, what this could actually mean, the way that we speak, the way what we should be valuing, what we should be working toward, what people should be anxious about. And then you've got the concepts and ideas that are being implemented more and more, which is getting people more and more anxious. And then we're talking about anxiety. And then I feel like in today's society, we've just got an unlimited amount of concepts.
Unlimited amount of information that lead to misinformation and contradictory between so many concepts that you just don't know what to believe in, what to know, what to hold as the truth, what is better for you. You just
If you actually want to go,
bombarded with so many different voices.
yeah. If you want to go on social media, like this is just like the silliest example. I've back tested this at some point. Then I go to social media and check what food influencers tell you to eat. You're gonna end up eating nothing. Everyone has got an opinion to say about something, whether that opinion is right or not. They just want to say it, and then they want to make a concept out of it. And then when you listen to all of this, you're left with only air. Literally nothing to eat and nothing to drink, because everyone's just thinking that their opinion is what's right, and they just want to put it out there. And then you've got people who listen to these opinions and they don't try to get the right information, like, you know, the research, and they just tell it to somebody else. And then you've got a huge range of people that are just following some.
I think the problem, the thing is that we humans, we like to make things simple. We like to be right. We like to validate our emotions, what we're thinking. So we look to the obvious opinions, to the extremes, you know, the extreme left, extreme right. There's a reason why we don't talk about politics, you know, and people take a collection of ideas and information that they heard somewhere, they stick them in their heads, and they never change them because they give them validation. They make them feel better, more comfortable that, yeah, this guy is saying this, he's right. And you repeat what all of these people are saying without bothering to reach out for new information, to get out of your comfort zone, to seek something else. So yeah, this is a bit unrelated to our topic, but I think we covered everything that we wanted to talk about here. So do you have anything else to say about emotions?
That's a harder question. That's a harder question. Like, maybe we should learn how to feel our emotions a bit more deeply than we do.
Yeah.
Life is noisy. Society is noisy. Everyone around us is noisy. And you end up getting stuck in a loop where you forget to be there with yourself. To what I like to call checking in that little kid inside of you.
You get uncomfortable in your own skin.
I've got this image that every single one of us got this little child inside of us. And then when you get too noisy, you start paying attention to the child. And like I said, life is noisy, life is busy. And then at some point, I feel like it's always good to just be a little bit in your own, in a quiet place, and just look at that child and just sit with that child and talk to that child and see how that child is feeling, what that child wants. And of course, by the child, I mean
inner child.
It presents your subconscious, your inner child, your emotions.
This might be a concept that people think is very abstract and they don't understand sometimes, and because they think that they were kids someday, that kid is gone. But that's not true. The kid is still in you. You just built more. You just grew up and developed more and understood more ideas, and you're busy with work and this and that you completely forget that child existed, who felt a lot of intense emotions and only lived in the moment and felt joy and sadness and happiness, who wasn't really thinking about his own experience as much as we do. And if we try to go back to that more often than not, we automatically understand our emotions as well, and we start to feel them slowly, more intensely, to the same degree that we felt when we were kids.
For sure.
It's not something that you have to replicate or you have to fake. It's something that is in you. You just need to let it out.
I think it's a process of unlearning and learning everything again.
Yeah.
Because since we're kids, we're taught a lot of things. And a kid is like a sponge that absorbs everything. Monkey see, monkey do. That's something that I preach to myself all the time. Monkey see, monkey do. So whatever the monkey sees, the monkey's gonna do. Sure. And when the monkey does, it just gets in the brain.
Social beings.
Exactly. And then you learn all of this stuff that are not entirely or necessarily true.
But you hold them as true because...
that's all what
you don't know better. You don't know
exactly.
better.
And then when you start unlearning all of these stuff, I don't know who said this, that people go to therapy to unknow themselves.
That's so true.
So you can actually know your true self.
That's really...
Like, you know yourself in the sense of you're like unlearning all the stuff that you've been taught as a child, and you're trying to figure out what you've always wanted as a pure innocent consciousness or child, whatever.
I actually heard that somewhere, and it really resonated with me. It's just really true. And we have so many core beliefs that we hold to be true about ourselves. I am not good enough. I am insecure. It's all related to your childhood. And if you try to deconstruct that and to get rid of all the noises, you connect more with your inner child, how you were as a kid. And that helps you in so many ways, including getting closer to your emotions, understanding them, and feeling them more intensely and openly and appropriately. So, yeah, I would call it here. That was a really interesting conversation. And yeah, so we'll see you next time.
Till next time.